8 months into my marriage, my life took a sudden turn when my husband insisted I take care of my father-in-law, who had become bedridden after an accident. I had never cared for someone in this way before, so I struggled with this new responsibility. While I was trying to adjust, my husband told me he and his mother were going on a vacation to Hawaii and that I would need to stay behind and care for his father. They left for Hawaii, unaware of the consequences their decision would have. My name is Maj, and I'm 32 years old. I've always loved cooking, so after graduating from college, I started working for a well-known restaurant chain. I now work in the planning department, developing new dishes and products, which has been my job for the last 8 years. I met my husband, Sven, 2 years ago at a small Japanese pub I loved. One evening, I decided to go there alone and sat at the counter. Sven happened to sit next to me, and we quickly discovered we were the same age. We started chatting with the pub owner and had a great conversation. After that, Sven began asking me out to dinner regularly, and we spent more and more time together. He was funny and full of life, and I felt myself being drawn to him. We started dating naturally, and after a year, we decided to get married. We've now been married for 6 months, living together in an apartment conveniently located between both of our jobs. We both have busy careers, so sometimes I don't have time to do all the housework, but Sven never minds. He always reassures me, saying, "You don't have to be perfect at everything. I'm just happy to be with you." He's kind and understanding, and I'm so thankful for that. I feel blessed to have someone who supports me in this way, and even though I sometimes wish I could do more, I know that what matters is the love and time we share together. For the first 6 months, our life together was wonderful. We enjoyed each other's company, shared meals, and had meaningful conversations. I thought our happiness would last forever. But one evening, I came home from work and noticed something was off. Sven was already sitting in the living room, staring at his phone with a worried look on his face. Normally, whoever got home first would greet the other with a cheerful, "Hey," but this time, the room was silent. I asked him, "Sven, are you okay? You look worried." He sighed and said, "My mom just called. My dad's been in an accident." I was shocked and didn't know how to react. "What happened? Is he okay?" I asked, my heart racing. Sven explained that his father had been injured and was in the hospital, but his mother told them not to visit right away since she would stay by his side. I felt helpless, not knowing what to do, but I could tell Sven was deeply affected by the news. His father, who was 66, had always been active, spending his free time hiking or golfing. Not only was he Sven's dad, but he was also the president of the company where Sven worked. This was a huge blow to my husband, and I could see the weight of it all in his silence. A week later, we were finally able to visit my father-in-law in the hospital. He gave us a weak smile as we walked in, and I immediately asked, "Are you okay?" He apologized for worrying us, but I told him I was just relieved that he was alive. Even though he smiled at my words, it was clear that the accident had taken a toll on him. He had injured his spine and was paralyzed. The doctors said he would need about 2 months of rehabilitation, followed by ongoing therapy even after leaving the hospital. During this time, Sven took over as president of the company while his father recovered. It felt strange having my husband suddenly become the president, even though it was only temporary. As I watched Sven talking with his father in the hospital room, I noticed my mother-in-law giving me a stern look. She pulled me aside and spoke in a sharp tone. "Maj, are you sure you're not letting this get to your head?" she asked. "Excuse me?" I replied, confused. "Just because Sven is now president doesn't mean you can start taking advantage of him. Don't forget your place," she said, her words cutting deep. I was stunned by her accusation. I had never thought of taking advantage of the situation, but her words left me feeling hurt and frustrated. With my husband focused on his father's recovery and my mother-in-law's critical gaze following me, I suddenly felt very alone, unsure of how things would unfold from there. I never had to worry about my finances because I had a good job and was well paid. But my mother-in-law always seemed to have something negative to say. From the very start, she assumed I married Sven because he was the boss's son, though I didn't even know that fact until well into our relationship. She smirked and said, "You must have known Sven was the boss's son from the beginning." How cunning of you. Her words were sharp, but I knew they were far from the truth. Ever since our wedding, she had been sarcastic and unkind toward me, always assuming the worst about my intentions. But I didn't marry Sven for his money. I fell in love with his personality. Feeling frustrated, I finally snapped. I didn't marry Sven for his money. I love him for who he is. She looked at me with a sneer. You speak like you know everything about me, but let me be clear, I will never approve of you. Just then, my father-in-law noticed the tension and asked what was wrong. My mother-in-law quickly responded, "Oh, nothing," glaring at me as if I had caused trouble. It was clear that she adored Sven, and from her perspective, I was just a woman who had snuck her way into their family. A few days later, Sven came to me with an unexpected announcement. "Maj, you know that Dad will be released from the hospital in a few weeks. Mom, and I think it's time for us to move in with my parents." I was taken aback. "Wait, what? Why are we suddenly moving in with your parents?" I asked, confused. "Mom suggested it," Sven said casually. "She can't take care of Dad by herself. This is the best time for us to move in and help." "But what about our apartment? We worked so hard to find a place that's convenient for both of us." "It's only 5 train stops away from my parents' house," Sven said. "You should be grateful. Not everyone has the luxury of a short commute." It was clear that Sven and his mother had already made up their minds, and no matter how much I tried to talk to him, he brushed off my concerns. As the moving date approached, Sven's attitude toward me grew colder. He was more devoted to his mother than ever, and any request I made was met with irritation. He began to lecture me almost daily. "How's the packing going?" he asked one evening. "I won't be able to help on moving day, so you'll have to handle everything. You'll be in charge of all the household duties and Dad's care. Don't make Mom suffer." I was overwhelmed by his demands. Work was busier than ever, and now I had to manage the move on top of everything else. I barely had time to rest, and mentally, I was reaching my limit. 2 months later, the move was complete, and my father-in-law was released from the hospital. My new role as his caregiver started immediately. I woke up at 4 a.m. every day to prepare breakfast, do the laundry, and give my father-in-law a massage before helping him change. I couldn't leave for work until I had made sure everyone had eaten and my father-in-law was taken care of. Even with all this, my mother-in-law was never satisfied. Every morning, as I rushed out the door for work, she found a reason to stop me. "Maj, can we talk about breakfast? It's not good enough." "I'm sorry, but I have to go to work now. Can we talk later?"
No.
"Sit down now. Don't argue with me." Her constant complaints weighed heavily on me. I started having headaches and heart palpitations every time she or Sven criticized me. But I quickly realized that arguing with them wouldn't help, so I remained silent and pushed through each day. At work, my colleagues started noticing my lateness, something that had never been an issue before. 3 months had passed since my father-in-law's release from the hospital, and I was still juggling caregiving, housework, and my full-time job. I barely had time to breathe. One evening, after a long day, I rushed home and prepared a simple meal of boiled fish for dinner. When my husband saw the meal, he sneered. "Fish? Really? After a long day, this is what you expect me to eat?" "I'm sorry," I replied quietly. "I had to step away to help your father, so I didn't have much time." "You should cook something that gives me energy," he said dismissively, pulling out a cup of noodles and pouring hot water into it. His indifference hurt, and I couldn't find the words to respond. As I cleaned up after dinner, my father-in-law noticed how pale I looked. "Maj, are you okay? You seem worn out." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just busy with work." But deep down, I was struggling. I tried to reassure him, but the truth was, I felt trapped. I wanted to leave, to escape the constant pressure from my husband and mother-in-law. But how could I walk away? If I left, what would happen to my father-in-law? He needed care, and I couldn't bring myself to abandon him, no matter how difficult things had become. I knew I had to keep going, at least for now. But every day, it got harder and harder to pretend everything was fine. As the end of the year approached, I had a few days off from work, but that didn't mean I was free from my duties at home. I spent those days cleaning the house and taking care of my father-in-law. Then, on New Year's Eve, my husband made a shocking announcement. "We're heading to Hawaii," he said casually, referring to him and his mother. "Hawaii?" I repeated, stunned. "What about your father? He needs you here." "He's fine with it," my husband said, brushing me off. "Besides, you're off work, so you should stay and take care of things here." He and his mother both had smug looks on their faces as they showed me their large suitcases, clearly enjoying my confusion. As they were about to leave, my husband turned to me with a grin. "Well, you'll be taking care of Dad while we're in Hawaii. We need a break. Have fun." With that, they laughed and walked out, shutting the door behind them. Something snapped inside me in that moment. I couldn't believe they thought it was okay to leave me with all the responsibility while they went on vacation. It wasn't fair. I wasn't going to be treated like this anymore. I made a decision then and there. I was going to divorce Sven when he came back. But until then, I'd focus on caring for my father-in-law, and I'd leave all the other housework undone. I was done trying to keep up with their impossible expectations. The next morning, I got up as usual, made breakfast for my father-in-law, and went to his room to help him. As I walked in with a towel and fresh clothes, he greeted me with a smile. "Happy New Year, Maj," he said warmly. "Happy New Year, Dad," I replied, trying to keep my spirits up. He looked around and asked, "Where's Sven and my wife? I thought I heard some kind of argument last night." "They've gone to Hawaii," I said flatly. "Hawaii," he said, his face darkening with disbelief. He sighed heavily, looking deeply disappointed. "Dad, let's just focus on the new year and make the best of things," I said, trying to lift his mood. But then he surprised me with what he said next. "Maj, I'm sorry for everything," he said, a serious tone in his voice. "There's something you should know." I paused, curious. "What do you mean?" "I've been able to get out of bed on my own for a few days now," he revealed, smiling softly. "I've just been waiting for the right time to talk to you. I never thought they would leave like this, but now seems like the perfect moment." I was taken aback. "What are you saying, Dad?" he continued. "I know you've been the only one pulling the weight around here. I tried to get your mother-in-law and Sven to help out, but they completely ignored me. On top of that, I've been hearing troubling things from the company's executive director. He told me that Sven, acting as president, has been slacking off and doing whatever he pleases. I suspect this trip to Hawaii was paid for by the company, too." My eyes widened as the pieces started falling into place. Sven had been careless not just at home, but also at work. My father-in-law nodded. "I called one of the company's representatives and asked them to keep an eye on Sven. It turns out he's been neglecting his duties, and everyone at the company is furious. I've made up my mind. I'm going to return to the company as president after the new year, and Sven will be demoted back to being just an employee. In fact, I'm going to fire him." I was speechless. But that wasn't the end of it. "The house is in my name," he added, a sly smile on his face. "While they're away, we're going to change the locks and come up with a plan to make sure they don't get back in when they return." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. After all this time of being pushed around by Sven and my mother-in-law, I was finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. My father-in-law, who had been quietly watching everything unfold, was now taking control. Together, we would stand up to them, and I would finally be free of their oppressive behavior. The plan was in motion. By the time they returned from their luxurious vacation, the life they expected to come back to had begun. A week had passed since my husband and mother-in-law left for Hawaii, and during that time, I had gone to the city office to pick up 2 sets of divorce papers. I was ready for what was coming. The day they returned, I heard the front door shake and the intercom ring repeatedly. They were back, trying to open the door. I answered them through the monitor, keeping calm. "Welcome back. How was your trip?" asked with a smile. "Maj, open the door right now." "What's going on?" my husband demanded. "I can't do that," I replied firmly. "Your father told me not to." "What are you talking about?" he exclaimed, panic creeping into his voice. "Did you enjoy the trip?" I asked again, unfazed. "How was it spending company funds for a personal vacation?" His face on the screen went pale. "How did you find out about that?" he stammered. I couldn't help but chuckle at his expression. Meanwhile, my father-in-law, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, stepped in. "So, you really embezzled company money for your little getaway, huh?"
Dad.
"What, how? You shouldn't be able to stand," my husband blurted out, shocked to see his father on his feet. "I've been able to stand for a few days now," my father-in-law said coolly, "thanks to Maja's help with my rehabilitation. And the managing director has kept me informed of your reckless behavior at work." My husband was in full panic mode now.
No, Dad.
"You've got it all wrong. I didn't do anything." "Save it," my father-in-law said sharply. "You've been fired. Pack your things and leave the company. You're done." Through the monitor, I watched as my husband's face crumbled. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Maj, please don't leave me." "You're not going to leave me, are you?" Something inside me snapped. "What are you talking about?" I shouted back. "Do you even realize how much you've hurt me? Ever since you made the decision to move us in with your parents without my input, you've treated me like a servant. You and your mother took advantage of me, forcing me to care for your father with no help or appreciation. Do you have any idea how exhausting and unfair that's been?" "Calm down, Major, I'm sorry." "I'm really sorry," he pleaded. "Your apologies mean nothing," I said coldly. "When you left for Hawaii, I finally understood it was pointless to stay with you. I'm done. I'll live on my own. I don't need someone like you." My words seemed to knock the wind out of him. He staggered back, dazed, while my mother-in-law rushed to support him, looking equally stunned. It was a sad and pathetic scene, a mother trying to console her defeated son. But I felt no pity. My father-in-law opened the door, stepping out with the divorce papers in hand. He handed them both to my husband and mother-in-law, who were too shocked to resist. "Sign these," he said firmly. They had no choice but to sign the papers right then and there. After they did, I kicked them out and locked the door behind them. They pounded on the door, begging to be let back in, but my father-in-law and I ignored their pleas. Since that day, I haven't seen either of them. Word has it that they're both unemployed now, unable to even rent a place to live. They've been reduced to sleeping in a comic book cafe and taking odd jobs just to get by. It's a far cry from the comfortable life they were used to, but it's the consequence of their actions. After the divorce, my father-in-law sat me down and said, "I'm going to hire a housekeeper from now on, so you're free to go and live your life." I took him at his word and moved into an apartment near my job. Since then, I've been living a peaceful, fulfilling life. I can't thank my father-in-law enough for standing by me and giving me the chance to start over. I'm determined to repay his kindness in any way I can, and for the first time in a long time, I feel free and happy.